This is Linux in Laws, a podcast on topics around free and open source software, any associated contraband, communism, the revolution in general, and whatever else fancies your tickle. Please note that this and other episodes may contain strong language, offensive humor, and other certainly not politically correct language. You have been warned. Our parents insisted on this disclaimer. Happy Mum? Thus, the content is not suitable for consumption in the workplace, especially when played back on a speaker in an open plan office or similar environments. Any minors under the age of 35, or any pets, including fluffy little killer bunnies, your trusted guide dog, unless on speed, and cute T-Rexes or other associated dinosaurs. Welcome to Linux In-Laws, Season 1. Martin, what is it? Episode 2557, if I'm not completely mistaken.
Ooh,
Maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah, I don't think we're quite that far yet, but it's close. It's close enough. Yeah.
We're recording this in the year 2079, I think. Clouds have taken over the world. The war is at rest for the time being, anyway. And
Which
gas
one?
supplies have been restored. Sorry, yes. Martin, that's a fair question. We will go into that in a minute.
Okay.
Gas supplies have been restored in the US and elsewhere. Martin, how are things over there in the UK now that the daughter of, what's it called? William, right? It wasn't Harry, but William now has been enthroned once again. As in, we now have Elizabeth IV reigning the kingdom, if I'm not completely mistaken.
Oh, I see. All right. So 20 I'm not sure there's any Elizabeth grandchildren, actually. I don't know what the names are. I don't keep up to date with these things, I'm afraid.
Hang on. I thought you were the royalist of the two of us.
Well, probably slightly more than you are, but I'll call myself a royalist.
Fair enough. I mean, as probably most of our listeners know, Elizabeth II died in 2022, but a lot of things have happened since then. But this is not a show about royalists, and no, jokes aside, people, we are recording this in 2022, and I'm more than happy to welcome Taylor Dolezal. I hope I didn't butcher your name, Taylor, to the show.
No, those.
He is one of the main people at something called Cloud Native Computing Foundation, but he will introduce himself right now. So, Taylor, the floor is yours.
Awesome. Thank you all so much for having me. When you said that we would gather the royal we, I was very excited. So howdy everybody. My name is Taylor Dolezal. I'm the head of ecosystem at the Cloud Native Computing Foundation, though that is very difficult to put on a conference badge. So I usually just put CNCF. Very happy to chat more with all of you today. I'm mostly focused on helping people get oriented when it comes to their cloud native journeys and figuring out, what is the cloud? What is it for you?
And Taylor, before we go into the details, especially a little bit of the history of the CNCF, for these two listeners out there who are not familiar with somebody else's computers, as in the cloud, as in other people's computers, and needless to say, also very importantly, the CNCF. Maybe you can kind of position this into a little bit of context, especially when on to something called the Linux Foundation.
Yes. So the CNCF was born out of the donation of Kubernetes from Google to the Linux Foundation. And that was really what started off the CNCF. That was one of the first projects in there. And the goal of the CNCF is to make cloud native ubiquitous, which, what does that mean? That means to really help enable cloud just about everywhere. We are platform agnostic, we're vendor neutral, and really just a great place for folks to gather and talk about how to implement these things, share best practices, and work together to build the future. So it's really, really a fun place to work and to be. And there are just so many people involved, which is something that I feel very, very excited about in my day-to-day.
And what's your background, if you don't mind the question? Where do you come from?
Yeah, so
probably the US, I suppose.
Yes. If we go way far back, Columbus, Ohio is so I am a child of the corn, as many of my friends have pointed out. I grew up in Cleveland. I started off my career in software engineering and software development, and then moved through various phases, working at multiple verticals, and really finding a home when it came to infrastructure. I owned my own company for a while and was writing code and software. And somebody asked that inevitable question, hey, I like this code. This program is great, but how do I deploy it? How do we run this? How can I access this when it's not on your machine? And it was through a series of trials, tribulations, and successes that I was able to really get into software or systems engineering and putting software into a larger infrastructure in a distributed system, and really never looked back from there. I worked within, more recently, the Cleveland Clinic Hospital, working on neurological functions, for everything from Parkinson's to multiple sclerosis to just several other things there. Going from there to Disney, that's where I jumped out to the West Coast. I worked within Disney Studios, and it was learned the value of a good story there. And it really was the most magical place on earth when all of your DNS was working. And then after that, joined HashiCorp as a developer advocate, and then finally landed here at the Cloud Native Computing Foundation as the head of ecosystem.
Given the fact that the Linux Foundation, and correct me if I'm wrong, is probably one of those influential industry bodies shaping the direction of open source in an enterprise context, never mind, it's the time to explain a little bit about the history of the Linux Foundation, if you can, that is, and also how the CNCF came into play after the Linux Foundation was founded.
Yeah. So one thing. So I've tracked more of the CNCF history. I'm a lot more aware of that. Just kind of getting started a little bit later in my life, around like 2011, 2012, tracking things like Docker and containers and really just open source in general. Watching .NET come about and seeing the open sourcing of the .NET framework, all of those things. That's really where I'm well dialed in. The Linux Foundation is a little bit before my career time, and so I'm vaguely aware of some of the big developments there, but really was just interesting to see how that organization came about to really foster these open source things. I think that really the too long didn't read version is that looking at what Jem Zemlin and many others have done within the organization, the Linux Foundation, it was great to see that they understood the need to really capture and foster that community for Linux in ways that they saw other organizations doing, like Microsoft was for .NET, like Oracle was for databases, like MySQL and Java, and all of these other organizations really had places in which to forge, connect, and make all of their platforms and tools meaningful to people. That was really the goal of the Linux Foundation. And they've done so well at connecting folks and crafting those foundations that we can really get together and have that united focus on things. It's not too broad in most cases. It's not too selective in most cases. It's just really trying to find that Goldilocks ratio, the just right. This works for us. Yeah, I know that, make sure the porridge isn't too cold or too hot.
That's interesting bit of history there. When people mention have been mentioning cloud, and usually it's in one sentence. Kubernetes is mentioned in the same sentence, right? Is that something that you would say is, or you want to expand on? I mean, other kind of opinions around, let's say cloud native or the public clouds, of course. So, do you want to put a bit more kind of shed a bit more light on what your organization is trying to do in one, is it synonymous with Kubernetes, which some people may kind of agree on, because clearly with Cloud Native we're trying to put everything in containers, and then the other side, sometimes Cloud Native is mentioned in the sentence of native on one of the public ones, right? So what is your opinion on that one?
And if I can interrupt that train of thought, Martin, because it's funny because you are the more hipster type of the two of us. So, and you see, before Taylor does answer that, maybe Taylor, you can explain a little bit about what cloud native in this context means, because I reckon that some of our listeners are almost as old as I am, and given the fact that I'm really old, now's the time to explain a little bit of these.
It'd be good to hear Taylor's opinion, because it's as I said, lots of people mention it in lots of different contexts, right? So it could be many things.
Of course, yeah. No, and arguably it's great to have your head in the clouds. I know that my parents told me, that might be a bad thing, but obviously it's worked wonders.
What about your software? Just want that in the clouds.
So with CNCF and cloud native and all of these concepts, it is really interesting. I've had many great conversations with folks. We've defined cloud native as a foundation, and it is really helping out workflows that run in containers. But we're seeing that start to change with things like WebAssembly coming about. And there are other tenets where, focusing on microservices and other things. But truly, it's my belief and thought that when you start to track these different interfaces and architectural patterns of how you go and you implement these various tasks, you have to answer the question, what am I trying to do? Is it book a reservation? Is it play a music track? Whatever your business or your vertical is trying to do, that's, likely that's what you're trying to do. And cloud native allows for all these various workflows to be possible to work. And so that's one thing that I think is just really important to realize is when we say cloud native, it's truly those architectural patterns and these interfaces that you deal with, whether it's, the cloud storage interface, open container spec, all of those kinds of things. When you start to track those specifications, it becomes a lot easier to work as different projects together. If you have your Kubernetes set up and you want to figure out your continuous integration or deployment pipelines, you can use Argo, you can use Flux. All of those things work because they have the proper levels of abstraction in which to interact with. That's one of the key benefits of working within this space and this ecosystem. And one thing I've seen too is that as these projects get worked on, they'll go through their various seasons. Folks will get really interested or start to drive towards certain features or certain areas of Kubernetes, maybe not even Kubernetes core itself, but other projects like Prometheus, like Argo or OpenTelemetry. And then we'll start to see, interest move over here, move. And so it's really important to take a look at the ecosystem as a whole in terms of its growth too, because to uncover and realize problems and work together through them, we'll see, not everybody stays in the same space with the same focus, which I think is really interesting. This really allows you to uncover different parts of the stack and not time working or focused on just one thing. It's really a great learning opportunity.
Yeah, so I guess you mentioned architectural patterns. Do you mean at that as kind of high level, or are we talking about specific ways to build applications? If we think back a little bit, I don't know, maybe 6-7 years, there was a product that came out called Cloud Foundry, which had that sort of premise of building modern applications with standard building blocks and so on. Is that something that you are trying to achieve as well, or is it more the Cloud Native Foundation's purpose to, let's say, recommend certain projects that are suitable for application development? Is that your role as a?
Definitely. I would say more that latter point, because as a foundation, we are looking to elevate the voices and findings from the community. We aren't looking to choose the winners or say, hey, this project is the only way to do things. That's what we're trying to foster and really be good stewards within all of these projects is, giving people the platform in which to talk about this or show the data as they go about adapting and using these projects. Things won't always be straightforward. And so this also is a good place for people to come together and share what is working, what is not working. There are several times where we've been asked to provide recommended architectures or, please give me this such that I can have that one size fits all way to go about implementing these various patterns or workflows within my organization. And we come back to those folks and say, like, we don't want to do that because of that. We don't want to pick the winner. This is a very neutral space. But if you have figured it out, let's talk about your stack. Let's share a case study and be able to kind of help people understand how, organization X or Y does this thing. And then people will take that and then be able to either build that or suggest some changes, figure out other ways in which to run their workflows, if that makes sense.
Oh, it does indeed, and that's a very interesting train of thought. Taylor, changing tack a little bit, taking a look at the website, I see quite a few prestigious projects, for want of a better expression, having now the graduate. There's probably something called Borg, when it was still the Google project, now known as Kubernetes, probably being the best example. Maybe you can shed some more light on a typical project life cycle at a CNCF, and especially how projects do apply and what the overall vetting procedure is, if you can speak about this.
Of course. Yeah, no, that is a fantastic point to draw at. So when it comes to the CNCF projects, we have these various levels of whether it's able to be implemented within your enterprise, your organization. So to kick things off, we have Sandbox, which is really just training wheels in a trial period for that project and for the CNCF. It's really just a place for folks to get an understanding of what services the Linux Foundation and CNCF offer to a project. There's no IP transferal or anything at that point in time, though when you move into incubating, that's when the IP and everything else become property of the Linux Foundation, such that we can defend you from a legal standpoint, which is also really important. When I joined the foundation, that was really what opened my eyes. Most open source projects aren't, people don't go after that, but really seeing patent trolls and other entities that were, ensuing litigation was just, I just was not aware about until getting to work inside the foundation. And so we want to allow for these projects to be successful and have a good foundation, and it's a pun intended, to build everything on. So I think that's really helpful. And then finally, we have that graduated state, which means this is absolutely ready. We've had multiple organizations adopt these tools, create workflows. We're confident this is something that you will feel safe using and is resilient. When it comes to onboarding those projects, selecting which ones get to Sandbox and how they move up through incubating and then get to graduated, that's our technical oversight committee, which is made up of folks that have been elected throughout the community, whether it be our governing board, whether it be our end user members. End users are folks that use and consume these projects, but they don't kind of package them up and resell them. It wouldn't be an Amazon or GCP or Azure, because they, like Kubernetes, they'll take that, package it, and resell that. The end users are more folks that like Apple, Boeing, American Express, Coinbase, Fidelity, Intuit, folks like that are using cloud native projects within their core business, and then able to kind of give some feedback around how they use these projects, and all of those folks really help out the community with able to share. The technical oversight committee drives the technical direction of our foundation. And so we have a lot of folks have a lot of conversations with them directly from a technical standpoint, obviously, that being the T in the name. And they help offer guidance or say, no, this project isn't ready. In that case, they'll try to resubmit in like 6 months. and they're just really good stewards of the community from a technical standpoint.
And that has been very insightful, Taylor. And what are the requirements for a project to enter or to apply for? And I'm especially thinking about, say, for example, licensing terms. Because at the end of the day, a particular license actually drives reusability, adoption, all the rest of it. Never mind the surrounding requirements that you may or may not impose, as in, when I say you, of course, I mean the CNCF, that you may or may not impose on a project. So the point that I'm driving at, I actually, have you any particular requirements in terms of licensing, code maturity, and all of it that you require before a project can even enter or take a look at this life cycle?
Yes. So there aren't any restrictions in terms of like, hey, I've got a project, let me submit this. So there is nothing holding you back from opening up a ticket and applying to have your project be accepted in that initial sandbox state. Though it does help, I've heard funny stories where some people have submitted vaporware that makes it very hard to get it accepted. You won't get accepted.
Seriously?
Things that, yeah,
Wow.
yeah, absolutely. So it's so there is nothing stopping you, but it's the same thing like a GitHub issue. Anyone can file an issue on most open source projects, but it helps to clarify and define it, and just to make it easier. If you help out your TOC representatives that are working through those tickets, it's going to be an easier time for you and for them as well. So that's really my recommendation on focusing on that. Write something. Submit as much information as possible that will allow for them to be helpful, and it really truly goes both ways. So we've seen some things like that where vaporware has been submitted, but the projects that do the best, we have a list of due diligence items on the TOC repository under the CNCF organization on GitHub. So there is like a exhaustive list and to-do checklist as far as things to take a look at. So there are no set things in terms of like you must have this many GitHub stars or anything like that. It really is a lot more subjective in some parts. The things where it is a little bit more quantitative are like around like things like you said, the licensing. If it's something with a closed source license, it's not going to have a good chance of getting accepted. And there's always exceptions to the rule, but the process itself is really subjective in terms of looking at the community, making sure that folks have been clearing out issues and that this project is well maintained. It's alive. It's a thriving ecosystem. So that's in terms of proposing a project. The thing that becomes a little bit clearer as you go through the various levels of maturity. Like when you're going to incubating or graduated status, the ask is to show examples of organizations that use your project and kind of interview them, get their thoughts, and have them share about what their experience is. So it's really, I'm biased, of course, but I really like how the TOC goes about showing that they've done due diligence in each of these ways and showing that the project is useful, and folks are happy to talk about it when it's genuinely useful.
And I'm just wondering if you could shed some more technical light maybe on the metrics that the CNCF uses for a project to pass from one stage to another. So, for example, when does the CNCF see a project fit that it can move from sandbox to incubator stage, or even to finally graduate it or something like this? Do you have
with the various
fixed and hard metrics for this, or is it kind of a voting process, or how do you go about this?
So with the various stages, it's up to the project to determine like, okay, I think that we're ready to go to the next level, and then to apply at that point in time. When something is in sandbox state, there's that annual review process to kind of see, is this still worth having in a sandbox state? Really just to kind of help encourage that proper software management lifecycle, right? There are some things that it can stay in sandbox indefinitely, though we obviously want to help projects move up the chain or decide that, okay, maybe this isn't right. We want to promote that motion. We are declarative folks, and we don't want something to stay there indefinitely if it doesn't have to. That's not a good life cycle if things are stuck there permanently. Everything has its time, its place, its season, etc. I think that shows in our organization, and those are my personal beliefs too. We should see things move along consistently, and put in good measures in which to see that happen. When it comes to metrics, there aren't any things that we have explicitly, like, again, whether it's GitHub stars or contributors or companies, we don't have anything set for like, okay, 3 companies use this, it's time to go to the next level, though the communities are very good at, raising up those voices in terms of saying, hey, is this, I think one of my favorite issues on just about every popular open source project is this project still alive? Is this still okay? I've seen that across, things like Terraform and Kubernetes and other things. It's just funny for me to see that when folks might not have their PR answered or issue taken care of just yet. But it's really nice to have. So we have something called DevStats, which anyone can take a look at, devstats.cncf.io. And that is something that allows you to drill into each of these projects, see what countries are using them, see what companies have people that are contributing back to these projects. And even if someone is independent, for example, say their organization doesn't allow them to participate in open source unless it's on their own personal time, there are so many people that take time out of their day, their evenings, their mornings, their time off during lunch, their personal time, their personal equipment and networks to go and to contribute to these projects. It's really astounding to see. And you can see, when folks are contributing as well. It's good to see that most folks are taking the weekends off. You see a little bit of a dip then. So it makes me happy to see that people are experiencing a good work-life balance. It's so important to do in the open source community because there's not many people telling you to take a break. And burnout is far too common. So really great to see folks prioritizing their time there. But DevStats is definitely one of the cool things within our ecosystem that anyone can take a look at. We aren't looking to hide data. We're looking to be open and transparent about all these things to drive that progress and allow for really nice feedback loops for people to do meaningful things with.
I was looking at DevStats now that you mention it. It's quite interesting that it's using Postgres as a database. But on that subject, clearly you have a lot of projects that cover similar part of the architecture, right? Or you have, let's say, graduated many projects that cover same parts of the architecture. The whole CNCF cloud native landscape is pretty complex, right? There are many different parts to it, databases, front end, DNS, et cetera, proxy technologies, all sorts of different types of technologies, fine. But there is a certain overlap, right? So, for example, if we take the database example, we got MySQL, we got Postgres. And so do you, as an organization, try and make life easier for people to navigate that landscape as well? And if so, how do you do that?
Yeah, absolutely. So yes, it's my goal. So if you take a look at the landscape, the CNCF landscape, I've seen many jokes made about it, just how overwhelming it is. Really, the secret is just I think it's Command or Control minus, and then you just keep hitting that until it fits in your browser. That's the solution. Actually, the opposite is what I truly recommend.
I need some glasses by then.
Yeah. You don't have a telescope or binoculars. Maybe OpenTelemetry can help.
It just sounded too easy. Yes.
Yes.
I'm all about the simple solution. Yeah. So really with the landscape, the thing that's good and bad about it is that everything's on it. That's the good thing. That's the bad thing. And what I started to get a sense for as I was talking with a lot of end users and other members and folks in the cloud native ecosystem is, what do we use for this specific thing? Say we want to use databases, what might we want to take a look at? And what categories of cloud native projects are there? That is where the landscape really shines and where it comes through. We've had one group of folks create the Cloud Native Landscape Guide, which is a lot more textually based. So it will actually walk you through and show you, how do I build everything? How do I build my stack? Do I start with provisioning, then runtime, then orchestration and management, and just kind of keep building on top of that? And that is what is most helpful in that case. Taking a look at each section of the landscape, and then you can take a look at, again, if I look at runtime, there's a subcategory of cloud native storage or cloud native networking. And those are things so I can take a look and see, okay, Rook, is that going to help me out with my storage concerns? Let me investigate that project. I can see it's graduated. I can see, it handles Ceph and some other things. Does this make sense for me? No. And then you can kind of take a look at other projects within that space. I think that is what's most beneficial about the landscape. And then the guide is a really helpful way to kind of focus in on the different facets of the cloud native landscape itself. I'm currently working on the CNCF radar, which in the past has kind of picked a topic by the community and then done a deep dive into it. The last one was DevSecOps was the topic of focus, but looking at, talking with the community and looking at what they want now, they want something that tracks these categories a little bit more closely and that allows us to have a more regular cadence in the radar. And here are the workflows that people are using, not focusing so much on the projects themselves, but what these projects unlock. I think that I hear a lot of people adopt Kubernetes, and that is where everything stops, right? They've done it. They've adopted Kubernetes. We're done. That's not true. What does this enable for you?
Yeah, what does that actually mean, adopting Kubernetes? That's I mean, as you are probably well aware, there's various stages of adopting Kubernetes. Right? Some people just starting with it. Some obviously, clearly, lots of organizations have been running it for many years, but it's I think the vast majority of the people are lagging behind. Right, it's a typical kind of cycle like that.
Absolutely, it's so true. It's so true. It's one of my favorite tweets of all time. I always have. I remember it, and then when I jump on a podcast or need to reference it, I never have the link in front of me. But it's the hey everybody, I'm hosting my WordPress blog on Kubernetes. It's a picture of the smallest box in the world you've ever seen on a flatbed truck, and there's nothing else on it. And it makes me laugh every time because it's is Kubernetes the thing you truly need? I really encourage folks to think about that. I love Kubernetes. I've worked in the community. I've been a release lead. It's something that I'm very biased for, but I really do get that sense of, is this too big to do what you want to do? Is this a good fit, or is there something else that you need? I really truly feel like people need that realistic view of the problems that they're trying to treat, because then it's difficult to get a good sense of what
it's very true. I mean, you have clearly, if you look at it from the technical side, fine, you're implementing Kubernetes, but if the organization's working practices aren't quite doing those kind of release cycles, and the way they develop those apps doesn't fit in with that, it's just going to be this sort of there's going to be another deployment platform rather than the whole purpose of cloud native is that your working practices are changed at the same time, right? Not from your traditional waterfall stuff to more agile development altogether.
Exactly. And within the cloud native ecosystem, you can, say one thing works really well for you. Say the CSI spec, and in dealing with storage is really important for your edge components or your data centers that aren't in the cloud, that are on-prem. And so you can use different facets of this ecosystem, and you don't have to have Kubernetes to do it. But you do have these interfaces in which to interact with things. And that I think is the true joy and possibility of everything here is that you can swap things out. Things are modular for that reason. Exactly.
Swap things out. How do you see that working in practice? It's, just looking at some of the customers we work with, it's hard enough to get them to adopt some modern techniques and technologies, but then having them swapping that again after a while, it seems a bit It's just a kind of a bit of a. Clearly, the Netflixes and those kind of organizations are all geared up to work that way. But I don't know if it's more of a culture thing as well, that people tend to be on the fence, and once they've made a change, they still like to stick with that for a bit and not. It's partly because there is so much choice, right? So, yes, you may have the option to swap, but then it's similar. You have to invest time and effort to see if is the alternative option. Does that give me the same functionality, etc., all the kind of things, right? It's I've not seen. I mean, it's the same as the multi-cloud kind of promise, right? It's once someone has adopted a certain platform, they're unlikely to change that quickly, I would say.
No, that's a great point too. I absolutely have heard and worked with development teams that, we've talked about implementing something, and it really is all about setting up that framework in which to work things through. I think that's the important takeaway there, rather than, constantly swapping. If you are doing that, there might be, you might have to take a look at your feedback loop and question, is this useful? Is this helpful? I have heard folks directly and indirectly, I thought you knew what you were doing working in this space. You want to switch again, So I think that choosing the proper abstraction is highly, highly, highly important on that front. When I was working at HashiCorp, taking a look at Terraform, where does this sets up and creates my infrastructure. Where do I draw the line? If I use Terraform to spin up and stand up Kubernetes, and then I want to start using something like Flux or Argo, do I just instantiate that and then start driving all of my changes in the cluster with Argo? So it's really important to make sure that you draw exactly where you want the line to be and where it's helpful. Organizations like Intuit, and kind of like watching their Argo story. I've got Argo on the mind because I'm currently going to be attending ArgoCon this week. So a lot of examples to draw from in my in my memory right now. But seeing them having a self-service platform that allows their development teams to get up and running with Java and Node projects and create this framework in which they can kind of spin things up. It allows the software team to do exactly what they want to set out to do, and that's write software. It allows the infrastructure team and security team to define those practices and the best way to create these runtimes for these applications and teams to be successful, to have the observability and telemetry and identify and resolve problems quickly. I think that as we start to see all those things get built out, it's nice to allow teams to do what they're best at and not to kind of push all the problem space onto a group or a team that typically wouldn't have that. I definitely saw that at Disney when I was working with multiple development teams. There's definitely a need to be aware of and to understand things at a higher level, though when you start putting the responsibility of infrastructure on a team that typically doesn't manage it, it's really, to me, I think that's an unfair expectation, right? How did you not know that this would bring the system down? How did you not know these various types of problems would happen? It's because they haven't dealt with that before. So I think that's unreasonable to put that expectation on them. And then, same with the other way, pushing software development concerns on infrastructure folks that might not have that understanding or that technical ability. It's a good way to grow that. Absolutely. I'm a big fan of being thrown in the deep end or going through the fire to figure something out. That's how I learn. It's
one way to do it, as long as you don't get burnt.
I don't recommend it for everybody, but I also like vacuuming and cord cable organization too. So there might be something wrong with me, but everybody learns differerly. So
very true. I was going to ask about the ArgoCon thing. Is this something that you're participating on behalf of the CNCF? I would imagine. If so, what is the role that you play there as an organization?
So with ArgoCon and with our other projects, we've KubeCon, that really came about with Kubernetes, and we're starting to see some other co-located events that we'll have at KubeCon, Cloud Native Cons, start to see those spin up on their own, like seeing the security group really just, there's so many attendees. It's a multi-day event. It's 2 days, before KubeCon actually starts. So seeing that, that might mean that that's time to spin something out and focus, have a conference specifically dedicated to developers and security. That's really our role, is to help foster those communities and be good stewards of those projects, and help the ecosystem evolve a bit, make that technology accessible and reliable for folks. So that's it goes far beyond managing and taking care of the administrivia of the projects. And we really truly see a lot of the good ideas come about from the conferences and people meeting face to face. It's great that we are living in an interconnected world where folks can jump on a call and speak, but there is truly just that magic about being able to converse and interact with people in the same room, in the same space, and come up with good ideas together. It's nothing truly replaces that. We're able to get things done around invitation. I fully stand by that. We truly create that innovation and magic together. And we've seen that in examples of one thing that we ran at Con Valencia was this past year. Our EU event was a CTO summit where we talked about resiliency and multi-cloud. What does that mean? What are the challenges that you're facing? And we've gone ahead and released a report on that as far as what our findings were. And then this coming KubeCon, we're going to be speaking a little bit more about the culture. What is your cloud native maturity model? And actually generate an asset that answers through our discussions. What does it mean to have adopted, a proper runtime or app configuration and management? What do these things mean? What shows that you're just starting out versus, I've got this mastered, or I've set up a good system in which to get a feedback loop going on. So I'm really excited to kind of see what comes out of that event here in Detroit in October. But that's what we're truly looking to do with these events, is meet with people, connect folks, and the bigger that we get, the more that we're able to, do this all around the world. There have been many groups and countries like the LATAM region saying, hey, we really want to work with y'all and create something here. And for those, we're trying to spin up Cube Days and, either one day or a few day events that aren't as big as KubeCon, but do allow for that collaboration between folks that they normally wouldn't get to have. And that's another thing that my eyes have been open to working at the CNCF as well, is that most folks don't typically get that ability to jump around to conferences and to other places. Most folks, when they're working with the industry, they're staying in their respective locales, and they, that cross collaboration of cross country or cross focus doesn't really happen. That's what we're looking to break up and shake up and do in a productive way.
That has been more than insightful, Taylor. Changing tack just a little bit. I'm almost tempted to say recent events. Just taking a look at the Linux space, for want of a better example, have, at least in the enterprise space, I'm almost tempted to say three competing distributions. You have RHEL. You used to have CentOS before IBM screw up. My words, I might emphasize. You have Debian, of course. And then you have something called OpenSUSE. When I take a look at the CNCF projects on the website, I do not see that fragmentation. Fair enough. But on the other side, if I take a look at the history, for example, of container runtimes alone, you used to have Docker, then Cryo came along, then Containerd came along, all the rest of it. And then, of course, the OCI also has certain, let's put it this way, ideas about how a container ecosystem, just to stick to this example, should look like. What are your thoughts on I'm almost tempted to say a steering role of the CNCF in that space? Or do you think, along the same lines of the old adage of free and open source software, may the better product in terms of project win that has probably the better technology at its disposal? Any thoughts on this? Of course, I am playing devil's advocate now, but I just want to hear your thoughts on kind of this more philosophical question.
Yeah, no, it's truly a great point. I think that there's several facets to answer that question, and I think that, and this some of it my speculation and just my personal thoughts, but other things I've seen within our ecosystem is we have a Kubernetes conformance program, and so if folks want to show, hey, I am running Kubernetes, it accounts for all of these test cases, we can show that level of completeness and resiliency to the community, and that allows them and gives them confidence in which to, say, adopt Kubernetes. Now, that's just one project specifically. The other thing that really comes into play, I've talked with so many folks within the open source space that have worked on OpenStack or earlier communities, some in Postgres, some in Linux, others in kernel development. And the lessons that they've been there in saying like, oh, I remember when we did this and it did become so fragmented, or, hey, be sure to watch out for this. There are so many good folks that are sharing that knowledge of what worked for them and what did not work for them. And the more that folks are able to do that, that is creating more stable communities, and communities that are aware of, past things that have gone well, that have not gone well. And that truly helps us be successful. Again, I think that's one of the best things you can do within any community, technical or not, is to share that transparency and that visibility. It's when you start to not be as transparent that I think that you run into a lot of problems. You start to, how is this thing going? Is this thing working as well as I expected? If you don't have the answers to that question or ways in which to ascertain those or research them, it's difficult to drive things forward, and you can kind of get caught up in all of the downstream effects of that. So I think that has been the biggest thing, is that we've been able to get insight from folks. We have these programs in which it's easier and better, easier with an asterisk, if it's, I try to hesitate using that word, but because easy is a relative term, but it's more straightforward to have everybody come together to figure that out. I like using the analogy, if we're throwing a party and there's just one person doing the dishes, then it's not really sustainable. It is, everyone gets to have a really fun time, but it becomes a lot easier if we all jump in, wash a dish, do our part, or figure out a way to automate that process. And then we can kind of go about focusing on what we want to do, have fun, get together, and kind of enjoy that theoretical party. But I think that's really important. And then our current leaders as well. I think that, as we have folks working within the space of the Linux Foundation and the CNCF, are people perfect? Absolutely not. People make mistakes, and there's always learning opportunities. Though these folks have been in this for such a long time, they have a lot of different perspectives. And when something starts to become a serious conversation, or there's respectful disagreement from multiple sides of a problem, or trying to figure out a solution, they are so quick to jump in and have a meaningful conversation around, let's scope the problem, let's try to figure this out. It's not met with something that is like, nope, I'm right, and then just kind of eliminate the conversation altogether. It's let's listen to you. We have we as my parents told me when I was little, you've got 2 ears and 1 mouth, so you should probably use your ears twice as much as you use your mouth. And that's, I feel like, what the foundation does very well is listen, and then act on that front. Measure twice and then cut once.
It's an interesting point on that subject of listening and talking. What do you how do you listen to, let's say, the users of these projects, or your user? Well, I can't call it a user base, right? I mean, you don't have a user base as such, but how do you get input from to your organization of the work that you're doing, and do you do any kind of steering there or adjustments? Where is the let's say feedback loop for CNCF, if we put it that way?
So this true secret to not so good secret, because it's not a secret, to CNCF's success is that each of the projects are maintained by various groups of people. So we help kind of unite and tie things together, but the CNCF exists to, make sure that things are open and fair, that there are clear boundaries. And so we can kind of help enable or make those connections at a higher level. But, we see it as giving these projects the strength in which to administrate and work within their spaces. That's what's going to allow for the biggest levels of success. Or if we see, oh, hey, the Prometheus project is doing this thing to go through their issues and triage. This is working really well for them. Hey, Kubernetes group XY, check this out. This might be of help to you, kind of making those connections, sharing that information. So I think that's the place in which we can help out with that. But these projects are very good and have their own entities set up within them to either, be a steering group, have a group that's focused on different facets of the project itself, and then, to kind of ensure that they scope things well. And then, that'll get bubbled up to our technical oversight committee or governing board or to, myself, Chris Anichek or Priyanka Sharma as part of the organization to kind of so that we can help out and drive success for those teams as well. So really is just a big place focused on making those connections and being helpful where we can be meaningfully.
Yeah. No, that's an interesting point. I mean, the people that, let's say, the technical committee or maybe in general, how many people do you have? Do you have enough people to cover all these? I mean, there's a lot of projects there if you're doing technical oversight. I don't know how in depth you do this, obviously, but presumably the list of projects is growing as well. So and are people doing this on a voluntary basis, or do you have sort of full-time? Well, probably not employees, but people assigned to the CNCF, or how does it work in that respect?
Yeah, so there's really there are three pillars of the CNCF. There's the governing board, and they'll manage like marketing, budget allocation, and those concerns. There's the technical oversight committee, and they figure out the technical direction of the CNCF and kind of handle those concerns, like you said. And then last but not least are the end users, which inform these patterns and source that feedback. I work directly with those end users and that pillar of the CNCF. And so I interface and interact with the TOC, but I'm not the one jumping in and doing due diligence reports and things like that. That's the wonderful projects team and providing that technical leadership to our cloud native community. Those are folks that are they're all listed on the website too, but they're incredibly helpful in terms of showing folks what's meaningful, what's helpful, navigating that space. They're all our time, it's whether, and this is all something that they want to do. It's, I've not seen a situation where somebody joins from a foundation. It's like, you have to do open source and, it's against somebody's want or dreams or desires. All these folks are so passionate about being here. It's truly their passion. All of these projects are their passion project. And it's great to see that. As it comes to unlocking different things within our community too, sandbox review does take a lot of time, but the group has figured out ways in which to kind of roll through those various projects and establish a framework in which to take a deeper look and suss out some of these projects. Are they ready? Are they not? Should this move forward? Should it not? It will become difficult the more and more projects that we get, but we can scale up the team, and then they are doing really well at triaging these things as they come in today to kind of get through that volume that you said. That's absolutely true.
I'm sure it's not an easy task to do all this, for sure.
Taylor, that has been more than insightful. Any final thoughts before we wrap this up?
So I think that I'm always big to, I like giving a friendly nudge if you're kind of on the fence or you're like, you kind of want to get interested or started in open source, or you have some questions about projects. I really encourage you, please feel free to reach out and I'd be more than happy to have a conversation with you, connect you with folks that are going to, say you're interested in WebAssembly. I can connect you with those folks. I'm here to help, truly here to help. And want to encourage you to either reach out to me or any of the members of my team. We all have open source on our minds. I think one anecdote is that I'm sure that most folks have had one or two dreams about their workplace, but since working here, I think I've had 4 or 5 nights out of the week. I dream about being at a conference, interacting with folks, getting back to people. I'm not joking. And so I literally have the job of my dreams, and really enjoy getting to talk with y'all. So please reach out if you have any questions, and I'll be more than happy to direct you to the right place if I can't answer that question myself.
Living the dream by the sound of it. Taylor, I suppose that regarding WebAssembly, you also taking questions beyond Rust, right?
Yeah, I'm a bit rusty there, but I'm working. I'm working on filling up my knowledge.
I mean, given the fact that
I don't think there's a programming languages category. Is there?
Given the fact that this podcast is rapidly evolving into a Rust marketing podcast. No, I'm only joking. No, I mean WebAssembly. I mean, I've been following this for the last year or 1.5, and the strides and the technology advances in this area have been just amazing. I mean, now people are actually running Python in their browser reusing WebAssembly, and that has been more than wow. It's just amazing. I mean, people forget about JavaScript. WebAssembly is the next hot shit. I'm almost tempted to say.
I think
anyway,
people forgetting about JavaScript might take a while, right?
I mean, seriously,
widely used there. Yeah.
The only drawback is actually that some people are already thinking about the next step in terms of really following the JavaScript rule and putting WebAssembly on the server, which may or may not be the right approach, but that's just my personal opinion. Taylor, that has been more than helpful and insightful rather than helpful, and interesting, never mind riveting. What we do normally with our guests is actually, and also with our other episodes, is something called the Poxies, as in the picks of the week. Martin normally refers to his adult entertainment websites of choice. I normally tackle movies and some other stuff, but really, no, jokes aside, anything goes. So if there's anything that has crossed your path within the last 2 weeks worth mentioning, now is the time, and we normally take turns.
Ooh, I like this. This is interesting. I am trying to think. So I have I source. I obviously I see so many links during the week, and I've moved from Instapaper to Pocket is what I used to keep track of most of my emails or sites and articles. But I'm trying to think. I'm just taking a quick look through here to see if there's any that I've got my eye on. I think what's been most interesting to me lately has been the README project from GitHub. I've really liked the stories that they've been sharing from the folks there. I think that some really live close in my heart. It's the GitHub README project. And I'm so sad that Stripe shut down their Increment magazine. That was also kind of like living in a similar universe. I also love all of the books that Stripe puts out, Stripe Press. I think it's press.stripe.com is one of the most beautiful websites I've ever seen in my life. If you go and get the chance to go through and scroll through that, it is phenomenal.
Needless to say, people links within the show notes, of course. Martin, any poxies on your side?
Poxies, well, it has to be Elizabeth II, I guess.
Yes, of course. How could I forget, Martin?
Yes.
We still have another 2 hours, so feel free to max yourself out.
Yeah, I mean, royalist or not, I mean, someone who has dedicated, her whole life to one job, right? That's pretty amazing. Whatever joy is, for that, it has to be my pox.
In that case, let me mention 2 boxes.
You're going to mention Olaf Schultz.
Megan, if you're listening to this, my heart goes out to you. You've probably made the right choice with kidnapping the grandson there and just shipping him off to the US. But this is, of course, just my radical anti-royalist point of view. Whatever the future may hold, I wish the royal family, and this is no serious, because they're going through a hard time, very much so, and people, they're all human beings at the end of the day, royals or not. The strength that they deserve going forward. And I'm just not talking about the next couple of weeks. I'm talking about the next couple of years, because I reckon they will be tempting. Pretty much comparable to the time when Elizabeth II took the throne. She was very young at her age, but I think she did a grand job. And that comes from somebody who's not exactly one of the biggest royalists on the planet, I'm tempted to say. So the best of luck to the royal family and everybody else out there who is suffering from a similar hardship at this point of time and in the future. My other POX is slightly different. I'm plugging actually your regional Linux user events as in community events, in contrast to the big ones like FOSDEM in Brussels, like the Open Source Summit. I think this is even run by the Linux Foundation, if not completely mistaken. The regional ones have their own, I'm almost tempted to say merit, never mind spirit. I was at a very cozy community event the other weekend in Kiel, which is really northern Germany, and also helped with kind of setting up the event, organizing the whole thing. And we're talking about probably 250 people like this. So in contrast to Scale, to Open Source Summit, to FOSDEM, where I think officially FOSDEM is about 8,000 people, but due to insurance reasons, the organizers normally keep it at that. But I reckon we're looking at much more closer to 10 or maybe 12,000 people over the weekend in Brussels. These are massive events, needless to say. Everybody goes there, more or less anyway. But the regional ones are important for a reason, because they are much more familiar, they're much more kind of community-driven, because the number of participants is smaller, and you have a way better chance to network in comparison to the more anonymous, I'm tempted to say, kind of bigger events. So people, if you are on something called the internet, and if you're interested in open source, I reckon you are, because otherwise you wouldn't be listening to this podcast. Check out this cat video network, also known as the internet, and please go to these local events if you're so inclined, and do support your local community. And this is my POX for this week. And Taylor, without further ado, thank you very much for participating. That has been more than interesting.
And thank you so much for having me.
The pleasure is all ours, and we're looking forward to having you back soon to give us an update on the CNCF.
I can't wait. No, it'll be fantastic. Thank you again so much. It was great getting to chat with you. And keep your head in the clouds.
This is the Linux In-Laws.
You come for the knowledge,
but stay for the madness.
Thank you for listening.
This podcast is licensed under the latest version of the Creative Commons license, type Attribution Share Alike. Credits for the intro music go to Blue Sea Roosters for their song Salute Margaret, to Twin Flames for their piece called The Flow, used for the segment intros, and finally to Celestial Ground for their song Sweet Justice, used by the Dark Side. You find these and other ditties licensed under CC at Jamendo, a website dedicated to liberate the music industry from choking copyright legislation and other crap concepts.